My wife secretly sold our family home for $450, $0 behind my back, then sued me for half the proceeds claiming she was entitled. And I just found out she's been cheating with her boss since before the divorce papers even arrived. It all started with a gut feeling I couldn't shake. Like, I'd been married to Lisa for 10 years, and I thought I knew her better than anyone. But suddenly, there was this gnawing suspicion that I couldn't ignore. The signs weren't subtle anymore, they were glaring. She'd been acting distant, secretive even. Her phone was glued to her hand, always locked, and she'd get defensive the second I asked about her day. I brushed it off at first, telling myself maybe she was just stressed at work or tired. But deep down, I knew something was off. Then came the day I stumbled upon it, an email. I was checking my own account, just routine, and I saw a message from her boss, Mark. The subject line was important, our next step. I stared at it for a second, confused, then clicked open. The words hit me like a punch in the gut. They weren't about work. They were about meeting up after hours to discuss the project, she said, but the tone was different. It was intimate, familiar. They'd been meeting secretly, apparently for a while. And the kicker, she told me she was working late that night when she was actually with him. That was the first crack. I didn't confront her immediately, I needed more proof. But I started noticing other things. Her phone kept ringing at odd hours. She'd slip away to the gym but come back looking flushed. Then I saw her car outside his apartment one evening. That was it. I couldn't deny it anymore. Lisa had been cheating on me with her boss since before the divorce papers even arrived. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach, then kicked while I was down. I kept all this to myself for a few days, trying to process what I'd uncovered. I was furious but also devastated. How could she lie so blatantly? And the worst part, she was acting like I was the one in the wrong. She'd call me paranoid, accuse me of being controlling. She'd tell me I was imagining things, that I was overreacting. But I knew the truth, and I was just waiting for the right moment to confront her face to face. Still, I had no idea what kind of storm I was about to walk into. The day I finally decided to confront Lisa, I was a mess. My stomach was twisted with anger and betrayal, but I knew I couldn't keep pretending I didn't know what was going on. I needed to hear her lie to my face, needed to see how far she'd go to deny everything. I set up the scene carefully, knowing she'd try to spin it somehow, as she always did when she got caught. I wanted her to think she could talk her way out of it, but I had my facts ready. When she came home that evening, she was her usual bitchy self, throwing around her usual sharp comments, dismissing my concerns as insecurities or paranoia. I remember her smirking, trying to act like she was the innocent victim in all of this. I didn't hold back. I told her I knew about her affair with Mark, that I had the emails and the proof. Her face twisted into a mask of shock, then anger. She spun her lies fast, said she was just venting at work, that Mark was just a friend, that I was crazy for even thinking she'd cheat on me. But I wasn't buying it. I told her I'd seen enough, that I knew she'd been lying all along. That's when she got defensive, started crying, and then threw the blame back on me. Said I was controlling, insecure, paranoid. She told me I was just jealous because I wasn't satisfying her anymore. That she needed excitement, that I was boring. That she'd been feeling trapped for months, and Mark was just someone who made her feel alive again. That she'd never intended to hurt me, just needed some fun. I could see the venom behind her words, the way she spat out her lies like she hated me but couldn't stop herself from doing it. I felt my blood boiling. The betrayal was one thing, but the way she was twisting everything, making me out to be the bad guy, was almost worse. She kept insisting I was overreacting, that I was making a big deal out of nothing. But I knew better. I knew the truth. And I knew I couldn't stay with someone who so easily threw away our marriage for some affair with her boss. After she stormed out that night, I sat alone in the living room, numb. My mind was racing, trying to process what I'd just heard and seen. The betrayal cut deep, but what hurt more was realizing how little she cared about us, about me. I felt like I'd been punched in the chest, like the air had been knocked out of me. I'd trusted her, built a life with her, and she had been sneaking around behind my back for months. I couldn't even look at her the same way anymore. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying everything, trying to find some way to fix this, some hope that maybe it was all a mistake. But deep down, I knew it was over. The trust was gone and the damage was done. I just didn't know what to do next, whether to fight for us or to accept that I'd been betrayed in the worst way possible. Over the next few days, everything felt like a blur. I couldn't concentrate at work, couldn't sleep at night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face, her smirk, her lies. I kept thinking about the house, the life we built, and how she'd sold it behind my back for $450, $0. I found out from a lawyer that she'd done it secretly, without telling me, just to get her hands on the money. She claimed she was entitled to half of it because we were married, and then she turned around and sued me for her share. That was the moment I realized I'd been played. She'd been planning this all along, selling the house, playing innocent, and then turning around to fight me for the money I thought was ours. I couldn't believe her audacity. She lied about everything, about her affair, about the sale of the house, about her entitlement. She kept insisting she deserved half the proceeds because she contributed to the house, even though she'd been cheating on me for months and was planning her escape. I found out she even contacted a lawyer behind my back, told her she wanted her fair share, and that she was entitled to it all. That's when I realized she'd been planning her escape for a long time, probably even before I found out about Mark. And then I discovered something even more shocking. She'd been lying about her explanation for the affair. She told me she'd just been lonely, that Mark was just a work friend, that it was a mistake she'd regret forever. But I found out she'd been sleeping with him for months, even before the divorce papers arrived. She'd been sneaking around, lying to my face, all while acting like the perfect wife. I remember the day I found her phone. I was cleaning up and I saw a message from Mark that was clearly more than just work talk. They had plans, intimate plans, and she was encouraging him to meet her in secret. That was the moment I knew she'd been lying to me from the start. The betrayal hit me hard. I felt numb, angry, and humiliated all at once. How could she do this? How could she sell our home, take the money, and then turn around and cheat on me? It was like she was trying to erase everything we'd built together. And her reaction when I confronted her about the affair. She called me paranoid, insecure, and accused me of not trusting her. But I'd seen the proof. I knew the truth. And I was done pretending everything was okay. I started to think about what I needed to do next. I couldn't stay married to someone who so easily betrayed me and then lied about everything. I decided I'd file for divorce, but not before I made sure she paid for what she'd done. I wanted her to feel the weight of her betrayal. I was going to take everything I could, my house, my money, my dignity. I knew she'd fight me for the money from the sale, so I started gathering evidence, hearing a lawyer, and planning my next move. I wasn't going to let her walk away with everything, especially not after what she'd done. In the meantime, I kept my distance. I blocked her calls, avoided her at all costs. I didn't want to see her face or hear her excuses anymore. Every day was a struggle, but I knew I had to be strong. I was starting to see through her lies, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like I was reclaiming some sense of control. Still, the pain was there, cutting deep. I'd lost not just my wife, but also my trust, my sense of security. And I wasn't sure how I was going to pick up the pieces. The legal battle was a nightmare. Lisa's lawyer was aggressive, trying to spin her side of the story, claiming she was entitled to half of everything because she contributed to the marriage and, of course, that she'd been a good wife. But I had proof, emails, texts, bank statements, that painted a different picture. I knew she'd lied about the sale of the house, claiming she was forced to sell it because I supposedly refused to agree. But I had the documents showing she sold it without telling me, and I had the bank records confirming she deposited the entire $450, $0 into her own account. She kept trying to spin it, saying she was entitled to her fair share because she'd sacrificed so much for us. She had the nerve to call me selfish and accuse me of trying to control her. Meanwhile, she was the one sneaking around, selling the house behind my back and lying about everything. I couldn't believe how brazen she was. The more she lied, the more I realized she was just trying to manipulate the situation to get more money. I wasn't going to let her get away with it. One of the most shocking moments came when I found out she'd been trying to get a title to the house, even after it was sold. She hired her own lawyer, trying to claim half the proceeds, even though she had no legal right. She had sold it illegally, and she knew it. I caught her in a lie when I got the paperwork. She'd been trying to spin it as joint effort, but the truth was she'd been sneaking around behind my back from the start, planning her escape and trying to squeeze every penny out of it. The emotional toll was brutal. I'd wake up feeling like I'd been hit by a truck, then spend the day fighting to keep it together. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and furious. I'd trusted her so much, built a life together, and she'd been plotting her escape the entire time. It was like I was living in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. Every time I looked at her, I saw the lies, the betrayal, the way she'd manipulated me into thinking. Everything was fine when she was secretly planning her new life with Mark, but I refused to be defeated. I started to focus on getting my life back, piece by piece. I hired a private investigator to gather more evidence of her affair, just to make sure I had everything I needed if it went to court. I also started setting aside money, planning how I'd rebuild after this mess. I knew she was fighting dirty, trying to drag things out, but I wasn't going to let her win. I was done with her lies. I was done being the fool who trusted the wrong person. Some nights, I'd lie awake just thinking about how everything changed so fast. How a woman I loved and trusted turned into someone I barely recognized, someone capable of lying, cheating, and stealing from me. The feeling of betrayal is like a wound that doesn't heal, and I wonder how long it'll take to trust again. But I also knew I had to move forward. I couldn't let her ruin me completely. I had to take control of my life, even if that meant cutting her out completely. The pain was real, but so was my resolve to get through it. The court date finally came, and I felt like I was walking into a battlefield. Lisa looked the same, bitchy smirk, defiant attitude, like she thought she could manipulate her way out of everything. Her lawyer was doing her usual spiel, trying to paint her as a victim, claiming she deserved half of the proceeds because she contributed to the marriage, even though she'd been cheating behind my back. I had my lawyer by my side, armed with all the evidence, emails, bank statements, proof of her selling the house illegally, and the affair with Mark. I was ready to fight for what was ours. The judge listened carefully, and I could see the wheels turning as I laid out the facts. I told the court how she secretly sold the house, how she'd been lying about her reasons, and how she'd been cheating on me with her boss. I explained she'd contacted her own lawyer behind my back and was trying to claim her entitlement to the sales proceeds. I also brought in evidence of her affair, showing how she'd been unfaithful long before the divorce papers even arrived. I felt a strange mix of relief and rage as I spoke. I knew this was the moment I'd been waiting for, finally putting an end to her manipulations. Lisa's lawyer tried to argue her case, but the judge was having none of it. After hearing all the evidence, the judge ruled in my favor. He confirmed that Lisa had acted illegally by selling the house without my consent, and that she wasn't entitled to any of the proceeds. The court awarded me the full amount from the sale, plus additional damages for her misconduct. The look on Lisa's face was priceless. She'd thought she could manipulate her way through the system, but the truth had prevailed. The judge also ordered her to pay my legal fees, which she didn't seem too happy about. That day, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I finally got some justice after months of betrayal, lies, and manipulation. But the emotional scars ran deep. Seeing her face in court, knowing she'd lied so blatantly, made me realize how much I'd been played. I was angry, but I also felt a strange sense of closure. It was like finally closing a chapter I never wanted to open. I knew I'd need time to heal, but at least now I had clarity and some sense of control back. After everything was settled, I moved out of the house. I couldn't stay there anymore, not with all the memories of her betrayal. I found a small apartment, started focusing on myself, working out, reconnecting with friends, and trying to rebuild what I'd lost. I cut all ties with Lisa, blocking her from my life. I knew I'd never forget what she'd done, but I also knew I couldn't let her define me. The sting of betrayal will stay with me for a long time, but I've learned a lot about trust, deception, and how far someone can go when they're willing to betray everything you believed in. Looking back, I realize I should seen the signs earlier, but I was blinded by love. I trusted her too much, and that trust was shattered. Now I see clearly, people are capable of pretty terrible things when they think no one's watching. If there's one thing I want anyone reading this to take away, it's this. Don't ignore the red flags. And if you get betrayed the way I did, don't let it break you. Use it to rebuild, to become stronger. Because at the end of the day, you're the only one who can take control of your life, even after the biggest betrayals. Now, sitting here reflecting on everything, I realize how much this experience has changed me. I used to think I knew what trust was, what love was, things I thought were solid and unbreakable. Turns out, people can surprise you in the worst ways. Lisa's betrayal showed me how fragile those illusions are. I honestly thought I'd be crushed forever, that I'd never get past the pain. But somehow I did. I found a way to stand back up, dust myself off, and keep going. One thing I've learned is that money isn't everything, but it sure as hell exposes what people are willing to do for it. Lisa's greed and her willingness to sell our house secretly, to manipulate the system, all for her own benefit, that was the real eye-opener. She didn't care about us, about the vows she took, about the life we built. All she cared about was her cut, her freedom, and her new life with Mark. That's what cut the deepest. I thought I was sharing my life with someone I could trust, but she was just using me. I also learned that revenge isn't always about getting even in the traditional sense. Sometimes it's about reclaiming what's yours, your dignity, your peace of mind, your future. I may have lost a lot, but I gained clarity. I learned to spot the red flags early, to trust my instincts, and most importantly, to value myself enough not to stay in a toxic situation. I won't lie, the pain still lingers, but it's less raw now. Time helps, and so does knowing I fought for myself. If there's one piece of advice I could give anyone reading this, it's this. Don't ignore the signs. Don't let anyone manipulate you or lie to your face. And if you get betrayed, remember, you're stronger than you think. You don't have to let it define you. You can rebuild even after the worst heartbreak. Take your time, lean on the people who truly care, and never forget your worth. Because in the end, the only person who can truly heal your wounds is yourself. And if I've learned anything, it's that surviving betrayal is just the first step. Moving forward is where real strength begins.